Hey guys, thanks for joining me. David Burns. Appreciate you joining my channel today. We're going to talk about June beekeeping tips. The first few months of beekeeping are kind of exciting because you're getting started maybe for the first time with some packages or a nuke, and you're like getting everything rolling. It's nerve-wracking, you know, if you're a brand new beekeeper.
Will this hive survive me?
That's kind of what you're saying. And then you roll into the month of June, things are a little more established, and today I've got 6 tips for you for the month of June, and I've got a bonus tip at the end. I want to help you be a better beekeeper and make fewer mistakes. That's really what excites me and kind of pumps me up. So let's get right into tip number 1, which is about swarming. Are we done with swarming? Really, come on. Can we be done with swarming already? Haven't we had enough swarms already? Some people have asked me, what does swarming mean? Does that mean you have bad genetics, that your bees are swarming and they shouldn't be? What does swarming even mean? Well, swarming can sometimes mean that some genetics show that there's a greater tendency for swarming. But on the other hand, swarming is a sign that your bees are very strong. Swarming is something bees will do to reproduce. They have to make another colony or else we wouldn't have bees from year to year. One colony needs to swarm to make a new colony. That colony makes a new one the next year and so on. So it's reproduction, and it's a good thing. Healthy colonies reproduce. And it's up to us as beekeepers, if we have the time, the knowledge, the skill set to get out there, we can probably prevent about 80% of most swarms by checking queen cells, making sure that we don't see a lot of swarm cells, making sure the hive has room to grow and the colony can expand into that hive. Those things are helpful. There's a lot of techniques, the Teranoff split. There's just a whole bunch of different types of walk-away splits that you can do. And so hopefully we're out of that season. If we're not done with swarming, and they are still growing and they're wanting to reproduce, this is a month where you want to kind of finish that up and hold on to what you have. So tip number 1, what you want to do in the month of June is make sure that after your colony has swarmed, or if you're preventing it from swarming, that you have a queen, that everything is going well, that they have room to grow. So sometimes people don't realize that a colony has swarmed, the population is down, they didn't make a new queen, they tried, failed, didn't have eggs after they swarmed, and it can just be a dwindling down of that colony. So even if we're out of the swarm season, we have to make sure that everything is good with that colony, that it's all going well, and that they're not going to swarm again. It's not uncommon for a colony that's really big and healthy to swarm a couple of times, maybe 3 times. So we may not be out of the woods and swarming depending on where you live. So stay on top of that. But one of the things that comes into play now is supersedure. And that's when they want to replace the queen that they have. And this often happens because they just want a different queen, a better queen, different genetics. Something's wrong in the hive they don't approve of her to some degree. And so they decide that they're going to supersede her by raising another queen. Let's face it, all the queens that go out and mate probably are going to get mated successfully, come back and perform very well. But that doesn't always work. When a queen goes out on a mating flight, flying over a mile away, mating with drones that aren't related to her, she comes back, there's a chance that she may not have been mated well, and she might not really lay very long, and they might have to replace her again. And so some of you might be experiencing not being able to understand why there's supersedure going on. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute with tip number 4 coming up. But I want you to be aware, swarm cells are going to be found on the lower part of your frames, whereas the supersedure cells are going to be on the middle to upper part of the frames, generally speaking. Now that can change and cross over and fool you at times, but normally we're going to see a whole bunch of queen swarm cells on the bottom lower part of the frames. Supersedures are fewer cells, maybe just one, in the middle upper part of the frame, replacing a failing queen. So keep a lookout, tip number 1, on swarming and supersedure. Now tip number 2 is all about supering. This is a month that we want to get those honey supers on, and hopefully you already have. Warning, you need to stop feeding if you're going to put your honey supers on. We want our bees to fly out to flowers and bring in the nectar and change it in by drying it out, adding their enzymes to it and turning it into honey. We don't want them to take our sugar water from our feeders and turn that into honey, because that's not true natural floral source of nectar. Does that make sense? If you're going to put your honey supers on, stop feeding your bees. So usually we have to decide, is it time to stop feeding, or are bees healthy enough on their own? And if so, if they are, it's time to add a super. Now, another question that comes up, do I bottom super or top super? If you're new to beekeeping, maybe you don't know those phrases. And that simply means when you add a super on to an existing super that's in there, are you going to put that super on top of the one that's there? Or will you take the one that's there, raise it up, and slide the empty one underneath the almost full one on top? So are we going to top super, or are we going to bottom super? You know what? Personal preference. I think we could argue that till the cows come home. It's going to be different based on everybody's unique philosophy, skill set, how you feel about it. And I change my mind sometimes throughout the season. I can tell sometimes that it's going to work out better to top super. Other times I think it'll work out better if I bottom super. And so to me, it's just a matter of preference. I do like, if I'm not going to use a queen excluder, I do like to top super. Sometimes I can pull it off where once they fill up that top super pretty good with nectar and honey, if I add a super on top, the queen doesn't pass through that super that's full of honey and nectar, because there's no place for her to lay. That way I don't have to use a queen excluder, and I don't have to exclude the bees from passing through more freely. I'll just use that super as my queen excluder and top super after that. I get the reasoning behind bottom supering, because what that means is all the bees that are used to going into that super up there that's maybe partially filled with honey, nectar, it means they're going to be passing through your new super, and that could make them more apt to get in there and start drawing the comb out or filling it up with nectar a little sooner. So coin toss, about a wash, whichever way you go, just make a decision. And just remember, this is going to be a good time for you to add those supers. My rule of thumb on adding boxes to another box, once you have about 5 frames drawn out with bees on it, it's probably time to add the next box. First deep, 5 or 6 frames drawn out with bees. Let's add that second deep to it if that's what you're using, 2 deeps. And when that top deep gets about 5 or 6 frames drawn out with bees on it, time to add your super. Now, should you use a queen excluder when you add your super? If you're going to be a skilled beekeeper and you're going to keep picking up your queen out of that super box and moving her back down into your deep, and you're going to manage her by picking her up and moving her down until they get that filled up more, then it's good to go without a queen excluder. If you're not that kind of person, you're not going to want to pick up your queen, you don't want to fool with it, hey, you might as well just throw a queen excluder on there. It will slow it down maybe a little bit sometimes for them to have to pass through the worker bees. But you know, you got to do it if you don't want eggs up in that honey super. I'll tell you this, a little secret, queens love fresh comb that's been built to lay in. They really do. So once you get some comb up in that top super above the brood nest area, why wouldn't you go up there, fill it up with eggs? Let me squeeze in a good little piece of advice for you. If you're adding a honey super, you might want to leave the queen excluder off for a few days or maybe a week to let those bees pass through easily, not having to fight their way through a queen excluder, so that they can start getting those frames drawn out. So many beekeepers are so frustrated, they put a new super on, but then they can't get the comb drawn out, the bees are going too slow. So a bit of good advice I want to share with you right now is that you need to add wax to your honey frames if they're not drawn out yet. That foundation, if you get a paintbrush, melt some wax down, I've got videos on this, and paint on some extra wax on those honey super frames with undrawn foundation, they'll draw it out a lot faster for you on those honey supers, just in time to gather up that nectar in the month of June. So let's get those honey supers on and let's either top super or bottom super and get that rolling. Now let's move on to tip number 3. Hey guys, thanks for watching. We're going to get right back into the video before tip number 3. Let me encourage you, please subscribe. I want to thank you so much for subscribing. Wow, we've just reached 88,000 subscribers. Oh my gosh, we're 12,000 away from 100,000. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. I can't tell you what it means for me when you give me a thumbs up. Please click on the bell. That way, every time I think of a new thing to say and make a new video, you'll be notified. Now let's get into tip number 3. Tip number 3 is it's time for you to really start worrying, fretting, being afraid, pulling your hair out to keep your mites under control. I know it's a hassle. It'd be easier not to fool with it, but mites carry many different kinds of diseases, viruses, particularly that can really be bad for our bees. So we have to control our mites. Now we're getting more and more generations of bees, and those mites are reproducing on the generations of bees that we have. So our mites are going to expand, especially in June, more so in July, and explode in August. So if you can start getting a handle on your mites now, there's a strong chance that you're going to have fewer viruses being spread throughout your colony, and those bees are going to be healthy. Got to keep your mites under control. Now, how are you going to keep your mites under control in the month of June? I think you should be using a green drone comb. That's really important. I'll leave a link in the description about green drone combs. Very good at mite trapping. You don't have to use chemicals when you use those. Screen bottom boards, a very small percentage of mites will fall through those screen bottom boards, so that helps a teeny tiny little bit. You want to do some powdered sugar dusting of your deep boxes. That's going to help another little bit, tiny little bit. And so you have some ways that you can kind of help your bees not have as many mites by not using chemicals at all for a little bit. But again, let me say, that only helps a very small amount. So you need to take mite test. Let me give you my philosophy on mite test. I think using a powdered sugar mite test is a very good way to test for mites if you add to that number. And what I mean by that is a lot of people don't want to do an alcohol wash and kill 300 bees. I get that. It makes total sense. I understand. If you don't want to do that on a mite test just to count bees, you can use the powdered sugar shake test. But if you do that, you're going to have to add a significant number, maybe as much as twice as many that you find. Now that might be a little bit too much, but let me give you an example. If you do a sugar shake, powdered sugar test that I have videos on. So let's say you test 100 bees. You want to know how many mites are on 100 bees. We kind of want a backyard beekeeper to have 3 or less mites per 100 bees. So let's say that you do a mite test with powdered sugar method and you find 1 mite. I would at least double that for sure. I would say you've got 2, if not 3. So, you know, things like that. If you do an alcohol wash and you do it correctly, and by that I mean you do an alcohol wash, you rinse it thoroughly a few times once the bees are killed with the alcohol, you rinse it thoroughly with water, keep trying to get more mites out. You're probably going to get a very accurate count of how many mites you do have per 100. So again, if you do that mite test with powdered sugar, add 1 or 2 more to your count, because powdered sugar doesn't always get all the mites off. Sometimes it does, but not always. But with alcohol, you're going to get much more of the mites off, more accurately, maybe all of them, and you'll know exactly how many mites you have. 3 is a magic number per 100, but again, don't just go by numbers. You really need to keep your mite levels down to 0. That would be the ideal world. I know it's hard to do, but if you can reduce your mites all year long by using some of these IPM methods, such as a green drone comb, screen bottom board, maybe powdered sugar, dusting of your colony. And when you get into July, August, and September, you can break the queen's brood cycle by caging her, putting her back in the same colony, leaving her caged for about a week, and you can cut down on a lot of mites. Be sure and check for queen cells. They do make some more sometimes if they can't get the queen laying during that time, but you can kill out those queen cells and release that queen back into her colony. But that's another way that you can reduce the mite level. By breaking the queen's brood cycle, you're breaking the mite's brood cycle as well. But just do something. please test for mites. Don't just say I don't have mites because I can't see them. I really believe all colonies do have mites, but it can be that maybe some don't, but I doubt it. Mites come right in the front door on foragers and drones. You can kill them all today. In 60 days, you're going to have loads back up pretty high of mites. So don't just think you can get rid of them once and for all. They're going to keep coming in the front door. So keep your mite levels low. Start it now in the month of June if you haven't already. Please, you got to keep mite levels low. You're going to lose the colony. Tip number 4 is all about being queen right, because a lot of you have told me that it's hard for you to keep the queen in there. She was great. She was laying well. All at once, you can't find her. There's no eggs. You see some drones and drone eggs or whatever, and you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I don't know what to do. Should I buy a queen? Should I let them raise their own? That is $1 million question, isn't it? If they replace their own queen, it's going to take anywhere from 21 to 31 days at least to get that queen raised. Take 16 days from egg for her to emerge. A few more days after that for her to take a mating flight. A few more days after that for her to start laying eggs. So you're going to be pretty much 3 weeks, 4 weeks out. Now, if you do the math, and let's say a queen lays 2,000 eggs a day in the season that we're in now, and you're not having a queen in there for 30 days, that's 60,000 bees going down in population while you're waiting for that queen to be raised, get mated, start laying. 60,000. You're losing 6 packages of bees. Wow. If you do the math on the finances, that's a lot of money. That's $700-800 worth of bees, if you buy packages of 10,000 bees. So I often tell people, unless the colony is so huge and it needs a mite cycle break anyway, I would always buy or have another queen raised and ready in a nucleus or something that you can move over. You need to get a mated queen in there as soon as you realize that one's gone. In the month of June, July, and August, we don't have a lot of time for bees to keep building up in population before winter. And so please consider, got to get a mated queen in there unless the hive is just totally busting out of the seams, and letting them raise their own will help the population. It will help mite control, and you're willing to go that 30 days without a queen. If you got a small struggling colony that needs the population of brood to continue to build up, they're not there where they need to be, got to put a mated queen in there. That's all it is. So I know it's hard sometimes to stay queen right, and you just got to do it. A lot of you ask me, where's the best place to buy queens? David, do you have queens? My schedule is too full this year. I've got some added responsibility with the Eastern Apicultural Society and being their field team tester coordinator for that organization. So that's taken a lot of my time up. I'm not going to have it to raise queens this year. I apologize. Sorry, guys, but I don't have any recommendations. I'm sure you can just Google, ask around, and find good locations to find some queens. As long as they're Apis mellifera, you're probably going to do okay. I believe in just using queens that are mutts. I'm not so fond of using specialized queens that have been raised a certain way by people saying they have these certain qualities and traits and characteristics. That may be the case. I'm not saying it's not, but I've had real good success raising mutts that come from very successful hive. Find somebody that that has a good track record of producing good queens, and that's who you should buy your queens from. Plan on spending $40, $45 and another $25 or $30 for shipping. That's what the going price is for good queens. You need to get them shipped overnight. I'm not a real fan of putting a queen in a box and putting them in the postal service for 6 or 7 days when it's real hot in June and July. So if you need a queen and yours is gone, got to do something, get one in there. Now let's talk about laying workers real quick. Laying workers means that your queen has been gone for probably close to 3 weeks. There's no pheromone from the brood, no pheromone from the queen. Therefore, the lack of pheromone is no longer suppressing the reproduction ability of those worker bees. And they can lay some eggs, even though they're not fertilized. They don't mate with drones. They still can lay unfertilized eggs, and those will mature to be drones. And so if you have laying workers, please don't think that you can shake your bees out, yards away, and the laying workers can't fly back in. Studies have shown that laying workers are indeed foragers. If you go to all that trouble, your laying workers are going to beat you back to the hive. And so don't waste your time doing that. That's an old wives' tale. If you have laying workers, the easiest way to tell, you look at your cells and you will see several eggs in each cell. And they'll be sometimes along the wall of the cells as well. I've got a lot of bugs today. So the cell, when a queen lays, a mature queen, a fertilized queen lays an egg, it's usually right in the center, one in a cell. But a laying worker doesn't have a long abdomen as a queen, and she will lay some against the wall. And so a cell might contain 5, 6, 8 eggs in one single cell. And I mean, not just once a mature queen can do that by passing over a cell again. You'll see 2 or 3 sometimes. But I'm talking about laying workers. Every cell has eggs, eggs, eggs. That's, you got laying workers. And in that case, they are hard to queen right again. And I've done some special videos, special articles on that. And so there is a way to do it, but it takes a lot of work. So I'll leave a link below how you can use one of my methods if you are wrestling with laying workers on how to get rid of those laying workers and get that hive queen right. But I'm telling you right now, ring the bell, because in the month of June, it's time for you to get this hive queen right. You've got to get a good queen. You got to get some populations built up. That's tip number 4. Get the thing queen right. Tip number 5, coin toss again. Should I split this hive in the month of June? Yeah, it's getting kind of late in the game. Can you start beekeeping in the month of June? Whew, wow, it's pretty late in the game. It can be done, but it takes more from you. So if you're going to make a split in the month of June, you've got less time to get that hive built up for winter. And so it's getting a little too late. I would say no, don't do it. If you've got a nice colony, just enjoy it getting bigger. Make sure it doesn't swarm. Make sure they have room to grow. Don't split it now. We're into June. And just put more honey supers on and enjoy all the extra honey. There's that little poem that we often quote, some variation of it. A swarm in May is worth a bale of hay. A swarm in June is worth a silver spoon, but a swarm in July isn't worth a fly. So June is kind of iffy. It might work, it may not work, but by no means is July going to be a time for us to really make a split or try to get a colony going, from a swarm, for example, in the month of July. So going to be iffy in the month of June. I would not advise you unless you're just absolutely able to manage that and grow it before winter hits. So settle down, keep what you got right now. Make sure all the colonies that you have are healthy. Mites are reduced. They're queen right. They're expanding. You're adding the boxes correctly. You're supering correctly. Your mites are under control. Spend your energy there. The tip for number 6 is feeding. Should you be feeding in the month of June? That's a good question. If you have supers on, absolutely not. If you're using some sort of treatment for mites, probably absolutely not. Some treatments you can treat with supers on, but most you cannot. And then also feeding in June would only be, in my mind, if you don't have supers on, and maybe you did catch a swarm or make a split, and you're trying to get them to raise or draw out new foundation with wax, feeding them in that case in the month of June would be good. But if the colony already has their combs drawn out, their frames drawn out, everything is looking good, let them feed off what's out there, the clover, the different fruit trees and all. Make them go out and get some nectar for you. Don't keep feeding them if all the wax is drawn out and all your flowers are in bloom. Some of you may live in parts of the U.S. where June might start bringing a dearth. And if that's the case, that's going to be a July tip. But if that's the case, you might need to feed them if everything's dried up and there's not anything out there for your bees to keep them alive and keep them going. You might need to feed them. Many of you have been asking me if we have an online store where we sell products or something. Absolutely, always have for many, many years. Honeybeesonline.com. Right now we're focused on the things that I have created and invented and that we make here, and that's our winter bee kinds that go on sale in August. You've seen those videos where the bees survive winter so well with those. We have the Burns feeding systems. Those are available, I know, and we also have things like the book that we wrote. But most importantly, on our website are our online beekeeping courses. I've gone to a lot of work to make these beekeeping courses for you. We've got basic beekeeping, how to get your bees through the winter, how to raise quality queens, advanced beekeeping, mite control. We have the ultimate class that has so many things in there together. We have a day in the apiary with David. We have spring management. It goes on. You can select which class best fits your needs. Please take one of my online courses. It's just like this, me teaching you beekeeping. It's not a Zoom course. Once you get them, you can watch them as long as you want to, when you want to, pause it, and let's face it, $5.20 a gallon for gas now. Oh my gosh, I had to take a trip down to Southern Illinois. I was paying $5.10 a gallon. So if you don't want to have to drive to a course somewhere, just take my courses from the comfort of your home, save the money, save the hotel expense, the food expense, and this way you can watch it at your pace, privately, on your own. I'll be teaching you these courses with my online beekeeping classes. I wish you would check them out in the description below. Now, I told you there'd be a bonus tip, tip number 7. Tip number 7 is all about how much honey should you take off. There's a danger in taking too much honey off, and if you do, the hive may not have enough onboard resources to survive winter. If you take it off in June or July and you don't have another crop coming, they don't have any more way to get anything on there. So how much you leave on, how much you take off, I've got a video in tip number 7, the bonus tip, right here in this video. So follow me over there in this video. How much honey should you take off? I'll see you over there.